You think you are living your life, your choices, your desires, your dreams. But what if you're not? What if the life you call yours was written by someone else's pain before you even knew how to speak? Let's talk about inherited trauma. Trauma doesn't just leave scars on skin. It carves deep into bloodlines, into thoughts, into the silent architecture of identity. You can inherit trauma the way you inherit eye color. A history of abandonment becomes your anxiety. A history of violence becomes your hypervigilance. A history of loss becomes your inability to trust, and you don't even know it's happening. You think it's your personality, your issues, your burden to carry alone. But much of what weighs you down was placed on your back long before you had the chance to stand. Let's talk about how the pattern begins. Maybe your parents never talked about the war, the abuse, the betrayal. Maybe they smiled through it, pretended it wasn't there. But you felt it. The tension in the room, the way love came with conditions, the way fear sat at the dinner table. Children are sponges. They don't just absorb words, they absorb atmospheres. And without anyone saying a thing, you learned love is earned, not given. Safety is an illusion. Trust is dangerous. Joy is suspicious. Let's talk about the silent contracts you signed without knowing. You promised to be the good child, so your parents wouldn't have to face their failures. You promised to be quiet, so the family secrets would stay buried. You promised to be successful, so their sacrifices wouldn't feel wasted. You built your entire life around wounds that weren't even yours. And now you sit in a career you hate, in a marriage you resent, in a body that aches from carrying stories that were never yours to hold. Let's talk about the symptoms of living someone else's trauma. You feel guilty for wanting more. You sabotage happiness because you don't think you deserve it. You panic when things are calm because calm feels unsafe. You minimize your needs to avoid being a burden. You carry fear in your bones even when there's nothing to fear. You live as if the war never ended, as if the abuse is still happening, as if the abandonment is just one mistake away, even when it's not, especially when it's not, because trauma doesn't need facts to survive. It needs memory. It needs the body. It needs silence. Let's pause. You think you are broken. You think you are weak. But maybe, just maybe, you are still fighting a war that ended before you were even born. You didn't build the prison out of hate. You built it out of love. That's what makes it so hard to see. And even harder to leave. You think loyalty means carrying the weight? You think love means suffering in silence? You think gratitude means living a life that doesn't fit you because someone else bled for you to have it. But here's the unbearable truth. Love can build cages too. Let's talk about how loyalty to wounded people traps you. When you grow up with someone else's unhealed trauma bleeding into you, you learn early. I must not need too much. I must not disappoint them. I must make their pain worth it. And so you shrink yourself, shape yourself, sacrifice yourself. You choose careers you don't love because someone told you it was safe. You marry partners who remind you of home because chaos feels familiar. You abandon your own voice because silence kept you safe. Not because you're weak, not because you're foolish, because somewhere inside, you made a sacred vow. I will not add to their suffering. Even if it costs you everything, let's talk about the invisible scripts you live by. Nobody hands you a rule book. Nobody says, here's how to erase yourself. But you learn the rules anyway. Don't be too happy. It might remind them of what they lost. Don't be too successful. It might make them feel small. Don't change. It might feel like abandonment. Don't need too much. It might overwhelm them. Don't leave. It might kill them. These rules aren't logical. They're emotional contracts, signed not with words, but with survival. And breaking them feels like betrayal, even when no one says it out loud. Especially then, Let's talk about how you inherit guilt that isn't yours. You feel guilty for wanting freedom, guilty for wanting more, guilty for imagining a life outside the patterns you were born into. You think, they suffered so much, how dare I be happy? They sacrificed everything. How dare I want something different? They're struggling. How dare I leave? You mistake loyalty for self-erasure. You mistake duty for love. But real love doesn't demand you disappear. Real love wants you alive. Real love wants you whole. Let's talk about why breaking free feels like killing someone. Because it is. When you break free from inherited trauma, you are, in a sense, killing the role you were assigned to play. The good daughter, the dutiful son, the savior, the silent one. And when you stop playing that role, people panic because your existence reassured them. Your sacrifice made them feel safe. Your silence kept the old system running. When you change, you force them to face their own pain. And many would rather see you miserable than confront their own ghost. Let's talk about the backlash. You will be called selfish, ungrateful, arrogant, cold. They will say, after everything we did for you, you think you're better than us. You've changed. And every part of you trained to survive through obedience will want to crumble, apologize, go back, but you can't. Because you'll know you were never living your life to begin with. You were living inside someone else's trauma, their fear, their grief, their unfinished war. Let's talk about the unbearable loneliness of waking up. When you start reclaiming your own life, it's not liberating at first. It's devastating. You realize you don't know what you want. You don't know who you are. You don't know how to live without guilt gnawing at your spine. Freedom feels like falling, like abandonment, like death. Because the prison, for all its pain, was familiar. The cage was home. Let's talk about the grief of letting go. You grieve not just the people you might lose. You grieve the version of yourself that kept the peace. You grieve the false safety of obedience. You grieve the years lost, living someone else's fears. You grieve the life you never got to live because you were too busy making sure everyone else survived. You grieve in layers. First, the anger. Why did no one protect me? Then the sadness. Why did I have to protect them? Then the terror. Who am I if I'm not their protector? Let's talk about what makes it worth it. One day, after the sleepless nights, the shaking hands, the terrifying loneliness, you feel something different. Not guilt, not duty, not fear, but peace. The peace of waking up and realizing you are living your life, not a performance, not a duty, not a ghost story. Your life, messy, beautiful, yours, and you understand loving them was never the mistake. Living their wounds instead of your life was, let's pause. You think freedom means betraying them, but maybe true freedom is the highest loyalty. The loyalty to become the person they couldn't be. The loyalty to end the cycle, so the future is built not on trauma, but on truth. The loyalty to choose life. Even if it means choosing yourself first, especially then, you don't start from a clean slate. You start from rubble, from scraps of dreams you barely dared to have, from instincts you silenced for years, from tiny, trembling truths you hid even from yourself. You stand among the ruins of the life you lived for others and wonder, how do you build something real from this? Let's talk about the fear of freedom. Nobody tells you this, but freedom is terrifying. When you've spent your life obeying silent rules, defining yourself by someone else's pain, freedom feels like being lost in a desert. No maps, no guideposts, no one telling you who to be. Just vast, terrifying possibility. And possibility feels like danger when you've been trained to equate survival with obedience. You will want to run back, to shrink, to hide, because the first taste of freedom doesn't feel good. It feels unbearable. Let's talk about the slow rebuilding of self. You don't wake up knowing what you want. You don't suddenly feel whole. You start small, clumsy, afraid. You notice a flicker of joy when you paint. You notice peace in silence instead of tension. You notice rage when someone crosses a boundary you never knew you could set. You build yourself in tiny moments of honesty. I don't want to go to that party. I do want to spend an hour alone. I don't agree with you. I feel angry, and that's okay. Each honest act is a brick, a small, trembling brick in the house of your real self. And over time, if you are patient, if you are brave, the house grows. Let's talk about the loneliness of authenticity. When you live your truth, you lose people who only loved your mask. You lose communities built on your silence. You lose roles that once made you feel valuable. And for a while, you feel like you have nothing. But what you're losing was never yours. It was the price you paid for belonging in systems that needed you broken. And as you grieve what you lose, you make room for something else. Real connection, built not on obligation, but on truth. Built not on fear, but on freedom. Let's talk about the scars that stay. Healing doesn't erase the past. There will be days you wake up with old fears whispering in your ear. You're selfish. You're too much. You're abandoning them. There will be nights when guilt suffocates you. When survival instincts scream for you to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. But you will know now that fear is not your compass. It's a ghost. And you don't have to obey ghosts anymore. Let's talk about the quiet miracles. One day, you laugh, really laugh without scanning the room to see if it's allowed. One day, you say no and you don't apologize. One day, you walk into a room and you don't adjust yourself to make others comfortable. One day, you realize you are living, not surviving, not performing, not shrinking, living on your own terms, in your own skin, in your own life. Let's pause. You think you're starting too late. You think you're too broken. You think you wasted too much time. But listen, every second you choose your truth is a revolution. Every moment you breathe without asking permission is a miracle. Every small, trembling act of honesty is a triumph against the past. You are not too late. You are right on time. Because you are here now. And here, shaking, healing, alive, is where your real life begins. Not as the continuation of someone else's suffering, but as the author of your own freedom. Your story starts now. And this time, it's yours.